Welcome to the Evergreen Thumb, episode 73. My guest today is Ed Adams, and Ed is a WSU Extension Master Gardener in Clallam County, and he's here today to tell us all about growing dahlias. This episode has a lot of resources, so I encourage you to check out our website at theevergreenthumb.org and check out our episode list where I will have a blog post with links to all of the resources that he shared with us. So, Ed, thanks for joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you.
To start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work you do as a master gardener?
Okay, a little background. I'm a retired PE teacher from Seattle Public Schools, taught K-5 and sort of non-traditional PE. I was taught sort of acrobats and circus arts, and retired a few years ago. And my wife, quite a while ago, had bought me a hummingbird feeder, and that's kind of what got me into the whole gardening, and led to fuchsias and then bee balm and salvias. And then we moved from Seattle to Sequim in 22. And in 23, I took the master gardening class, and I've been super involved ever since. Just got my 1,000 hour pin. So
Oh, wow.
Been pretty busy. Also into Japanese maples. I've a couple hundred Japanese maples. And about 600 to 700 dahlia plants at my house. And then I take care of the dahlias over at Woodcock Garden in Sequim. I've done stuff with the botanical garden in Sequim as well. So yeah, just love it all. So lots of fun.
So why dahlias in particular?
When I was a kid, my grandmother up in northern Alberta had a huge pollinating garden, and it included stuff like dahlias and some of those things, and she had a lot of dahlias, and I just remember them being so beautiful. And then one of my sisters was always out there working with her, and she got the green thumb from my grandma. And then my mother as well liked dahlias and just loved gardening. I love dahlias because they bloom basically from mid to end of June all the way up until Thanksgiving often. So not just the 2 weeks like tulips or
iris.
Other flowers. Iris. I love irises, but yeah, they don't bloom very long.
They don't bloom
so
very
many
long.
Plants don't bloom very long.
So what does managing 600 plus dahlia varieties look like in your garden?
Yeah, I kind of do the drift. So I have like one bed that'll be like mostly all pink and white, and then another bed that'll be like mostly yellow. So I've got like 7 different beds, and yeah, it's a lot of work, but it sure is a lot of fun. So you drive down our road and you can see the dahlias from quite a ways away, and everything else. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's so much fun. And then we don't sell them or anything. My wife she takes bouquets in to work every day for her coworkers, and everybody's all smiles. So,
what is it about the climate on the peninsula or in the Sequim area that makes dahlias such a good choice?
Dahlias love sun and like to be dry. So, it doesn't get too hot here. I mean, rarely do we get over 80 once in a while. So they don't get scorched. They don't like a lot of rain, so we don't get a lot of rain out here. You can control it with your hose. Very late frost, like I said earlier, frost goes all the way, up to Thanksgiving. And then a lot of people in the area, they just leave their dahlias in the ground over winter. They're such a great flower. I mean, it's like there's a dahlia for everybody because there's so many different varieties, and they're long bloomers, they attract pollinators, and Sequim's just a great place to grow them.
I know there's a range of forms as far as the style of the blossom. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those?
Oh yeah, we've got lots of different forms, and I recently joined the Dahlia Society in Kitsap County, and then also down in Tacoma. I know it's a little ways to drive, but yeah, it's worth it because there's all these different classifications. You can get some that look like a cactus. My favorite are either the balls; they look like a little ball, and they're super dense, or there's like a pom-pom. There's formal and decorative, informal decorative. There's just a whole bunch of different varieties, and you get the ones that are like the dinner plate that are, 7 to 10 inches across. So if people really like those, my sister loves those. Just a big variety. There's the little palms, the little tiny palms, which are cool. You get some that grow less than 10 inches. You get others that grow 6 or 7 feet tall. So yeah, so there's a dahlia for everybody.
Yeah, for some reason the dinner plate form always stuck out in my memory just because of how huge they can be.
Right. They're like majestic, they're just this great big huge flower. So it's super cool. So of course, they don't do really well if you have a lot of rain because, they get rain and then they just, fall right over. So that's just the drawback of having the big huge ones. So yeah, I love the palms or the balls because they're super dense. It looks like some architects, designed them. It's super cool.
When I lived in the Seattle area, I remember I basically grew them as annuals because they would rot and I didn't ever want to dig them up.
Yep. Yeah, it's a lot of work to dig them up.
For listeners who would be interested in growing dahlias, choosing tubers versus cuttings versus buying starts, what's the advantages or disadvantages?
I mean, the best way to go if you're a beginner, and even for most people, is just to buy the tubers or horse trade them. The little starts are really tough. You get them in a pot, they're not as easy as well. And then to try to propagate them is a lot of work. So, and then as far as buying the tubers, I mean, you can pick them up at, the big box stores and local farmers. There's lots of dahlia farmers, or the Dahlia societies also have, big sales in the spring. And that's actually my recommendation, is to get them from the local farmers or from the Dahlia societies because they're generally healthy. The big shipped over here from Netherlands, and then often there's, diseases or viruses associated with that. Yeah, tubers, and then, doing the horse trading with friends and stuff as well. Just got to be careful. You don't, bring home stuff, a virus or a spider mite or something like that.
That was going to be my next question: is how do you know if the tubers are healthy? What do you look for if it's not a healthy tuber?
Well, you can feel the density of them. If they're squishy or if they're shriveled up, you want them nice and firm and plump, and they should feel kind of like a raw sweet potato. That's kind of how I always envision it. So, and then if you're not sure, I always do what I call pre-sprouting. So I put them in like just a little garden tray, a couple inches of soil down, like potting soil, no fertilizer or even peat moss. I put them in there, lay them down horizontal. If you can see the eye, and a lot of times even if you can't see the eye, you put them in there and then you cover them up with a little bit of soil, and then you leave them there for a couple weeks. And then if there's any viruses or any issues, those will show up there, and you're not contaminating the soil where they're going to get planted. Another good thing about that too is then you can see if they're actually viable. So, because sometimes you get one and the crown is a little broken off or the neck is weak, and it'll never sprout.
So you mentioned sun, how much they like sun.
Yeah, they like about 6 hours, at least 6 hours of full sun every day. So if you got that shady spot, I'd recommend not doing it. And so that's another advantage of living in Sequim. We get a lot of sun here. We get that blue sky. So.
Right. So what about other conditions for growing them, like the soil or water?
Yeah, when you're going to select where to plant them, you're looking for good soil, not too much sand. Of course, you don't want too much clay because if they get a lot of sand, it's going to dry too quickly. If you get a lot of clay, it's going to hold the water, and you get that tuber rot. That may be what you experienced in Seattle when you were there. And of course, don't do any amendments until you do your soil test. So recommend always doing the soil test. Another thing you can do when you're selecting or deciding is you can either find a mound or build a mound or a berm, because the elevation helps with drainage. Over in the Sequim Botanical Garden, they have a terraced area, so the dahlias are right at the top, so they never rot, and they leave them in all winter long, and they never rot. But because they're draining, gravity's pulling all that water down, so they're not sitting in water. So, of course, in the summertime, they have to do a lot of heavy watering.
Yeah, where I'm at now, I have very fast draining soil. Anyway, so I haven't tried to plant dahlias down here just because we are scorching hot in the
Yeah.
summer.
Yeah. Where are you at in Olympia?
I'm just south of Olympia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You're hotter in the summer and you're quite a bit colder in the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
it can get down into the teens on occasion down here.
and then when you decide where you're going to plant them, you want to have just really loose, well draining soil, and because the roots need oxygen, and everything else. All those little creatures need lots of oxygen. And you can also mix in a little cow or steer manure in the fall, so good age, and that'll be a good preparation for it. When to plant, yeah, in the Pacific Northwest, generally you're looking for that last frost, and it's most of the time it's after Mother's Day. We did plant a little earlier here this year because we had quite hot up here, so we were last week and we were 80 degrees for a couple days. So, yeah, planting. We're still thinking about planting, talking about planting. Space your tubers about 12 to 18 inches apart. If you have wind, you can plant them even a little bit closer, and that's what I do. I plant them just a little bit closer because then they hold each other up. Plant them horizontal, 4 to 6 inches deep. In fact, we planted about a dozen of them this morning over in the woodcock garden. No need to water your plants for a while, or when you plant them. If the soil's really dry, then you can get it a little wet. And then the tubers, they'll bloom anywhere between 60 and 90 days.
So are there any special watering practices? Like you said, you don't really need to water them so much this time of year, like it later in the summer.
Yeah, they don't like to sit in wet feet, but they love to be watered. They're heavy feeders, so start watering once that little shoot like sticks up, and then keep the soil kind of even and not soggy. Deep watering means somewhere between 8 to 10 inches you want to get down, and I personally do it about 2 or 3 times a week, and different types of watering, drip systems or soaker hoses are a great way to do it because they do it nice and slow. They seep in really deep. I like overhead sprinklers. You use an overhead sprinkler, people are like, oh, they're thinking roses, they're going to get like black spot or something. But yeah, with dahlias, a lot of the farms do overhead watering. And then what else? Oh, hand watering. I've got spots where I have to hand water and it works fine, but you just got to really make sure that you water them enough because it's easy not to get enough water when you do the hand watering. But the good thing about hand watering, and we'll talk about this when we get to pests, is that you can water up from the ground, so you can spray the underside of the leaves.
Nice.
Did we talk about staking?
We haven't, no.
Yeah, so when you're planting your dahlias, the best time to put your stakes in is right then, because then you don't damage anything. And I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff people use, like T-posts and then some kind of string. They'll use just wooden stakes. I've used tomato cages. I've seen the Hortonova, those horizontal trellises. They're about 6 inches apart. Those work really well. And then the dahlias will grow up and kind of hold themselves up. Because, yeah, if you don't stake them, and if they're, too far apart, they'll often just fall down. So, you'll get that one big heavy rain and down they go, or you get a big wind and they'll fall over, especially those dinner plates. So,
yeah. Okay, so what about maintenance during the growing season?
Yeah, so when they start growing, this is really hard for most of us. When they start growing, when they get about 3 to 5 leaves high, so that's still pretty short, you'll want to pinch them. That means you're just going to go up and you're going to pinch off the top part. That way you're going to get a nice bushy plant with lots of flowers. And people are like, oh, my dahlia is just starting to grow and you're telling me to, pinch it back. But it really does help. That's one good thing. And then fertilize. So after you first plant them, about 2 to 4 weeks, you'll go in and you see the sprouts have emerged and they've stuck up above the ground, and you'll give them their first fertilizing. I like to use like organic stuff, Dark to Earth and It's a low nitrogen. There's quite a few people who use tomato and vegetable fertilizer. I've used Alaska fish oil quite a bit. And then you'll just continue to fertilize, throughout the summer, about every 3 to 4 weeks, and all the way up until about the end of August, because then they'll start. You don't want them to keep going too hard, so they've got enough food already by that point. The other good thing about fertilizing is it helps build up resistance to damaging insects or diseases. And then we mentioned briefly about cow manure and steer manure. Just be cautious, because if you get them too hot, they're going to burn your plants. Like horse manure and chicken manure, I would never use, because the nitrogen is way too high up there, and they also contain weed seeds. But yeah, cow manure, steer manure is a good way. Weeding, you're going to be doing quite a bit of weeding for a little bit until they get bushed out. The weeds will rob the water and the nutrients from the dahlia. Hand weeding is the only way you can do it for dahlias. There's no exceptions. You can't use tools, and you definitely can't use any kind of pesticide or pre-emergent herbicide, because it'll kill your dahlias, because the dahlias, they got these string roots, these hair roots that grow off of them, and they'll soak up everything. Deadheading. So throughout the year, once they start blooming, you're going to go out and you're going to either cut the flowers for bouquets or for giving to people, or you're going to remove the spent blooms. And the more you cut and the more you deadhead, the better your plant is going to grow and the more flowers you're going to get.
What are some of the common pest issues?
Oh, yeah. So we talked about horse trading. So I remember a few years back, I was doing some horse trading with somebody. I got one, and she gave it to me in a pot. And I think it had sat a little bit dry for a while. And I brought it home, and I'm like, it just didn't look right. And then all of a sudden I have the dreaded spider mite. And spider mites are not fun. Slugs, snails, you're going to start treating for that right away. Earwigs, they just do a lot of damage. They'll chew the leaves, and sometimes they'll chew the flowers. For the slugs and snails, like I say, I start like we planted today, and I put a little bit of it around, and sluggo and cories, those are considered organic. You can also use the beer traps. And I saw you had somebody on that did a slug and snail. That was really cool to watch. Spider mites. Spider mites are the number one issue for dahlia growers. So they'll just start at the bottom, and they'll basically ruin your plant. And they'll go all the way down into the roots. So if you see that you have spider mites, actually, I start treating for them right away. As soon as they get about 2 to 3 inches tall, I'll do a little bit of spraying with them. And then once your plant starts getting big, if you get spider mites, you just start stripping off the bottom foliage. So, it gets rid of it. And I put it in a bag and throw it in the trash, so I don't keep it on my property. Ways to control spider mites. You can use insecticidal soaps, miticides, horticulture oils and sprays. Earwigs are another common pest. And Sluggo Plus actually helps with earwigs. So not Sluggo, but Sluggo Plus. It's got something in there. And then you got your natural pests. So like on my property, I've got frogs and toads and ladybugs. And during the summer, I get the praying mantis. And, they help with all those things. Vole damage. A lot of people experience a lot of voles. Not moles, but voles. Voles are the ones that eat organic material. Moles eat, flesh, so like worms and grubs. And I think the best way to get rid of voles is just little mouse traps. And I've tried lots of different things. I had a colony when I moved to our place, and I've gradually got rid of it. But, you start with the peanut butter, and when that stops working, then you can do a little Wonder Bread dipped in ranch or Wonder Bread dipped in bacon grease. And yeah, I've caught a lot of voles, and I don't have that problem. Natural predators, we have owls that live on our property, and of course hawks, possums, garter snakes, newts, and even coyotes. I see them trying to get the voles. So those are kind of the main pests, and those are some of the controls for those pests.
So are there any issues? You mentioned viruses, but what about other disease considerations, and how do you prevent?
The American Dahlia Society says that 87% of all dahlias have some sort of virus, which was kind of surprising. And the most popular one is called mosaic virus. And it's more this, it just doesn't look good. Your leaves look, sort of patchy and blotchy with yellow spots on them. And, people want them to look and see a nice green leaf. And then, of course, there's the crown gall or leafy gall. And if you have the crown gall or the leafy gall, that's when you dig up that whole area and you kind of quarantine it off for a little while because it'll spread. If you plant something else there, it'll end up getting. And yeah, you get these big knobby swellings of galls and looks kind of like cottage cheese. Yeah, lots of distortions. So when you're doing your horse trading, just make sure you know who you're getting them from, and if you don't, like I said, do the pre-sprouting, stick it in a self-contained area for just a little while until it. Make sure you don't have that. Powdery mildew. Sequim is a little bit windy, so we don't really have that problem in Sequim, but a lot of people with dahlias will get powdery mildew. And I mean, it doesn't do anything to the plant other than it just doesn't look very good. But you can use, copper fungicides. You can just hose it off too. So, or you can spread the planting out a little bit further. You can go 18 to 24 inches and encourage a little more circulation so that you don't get the powdery mildew.
If you're in an area where they're prone to rotting because of the damp soil in the winter, when do you dig them up and how do you store them?
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with before you dig them up, you're going to get all your labeling stuff together. It's important to a lot of people to make sure they know what they have. I mean, there's been times where I'm just like, I just care where's the color and the height. But get all your labeling, tagging, map it out, which how you're going to take care of them, and then you're going to get some dividing tools. You get your little utility knife, your snips, your pruners, and then I also use an oscillating saw. So you can look that up. That's for those really big clumps that you can't get apart. And then you're disinfecting because you don't want to spread anything that you don't know you have. So if you do have a virus or something, so between every clump, a clump is a whole bunch of tubers all put together, so it's one big plant. I disinfect whatever tools I have with bleach, any kind of spray. Or Lysol works really well too, alcohol. And then, that end of November comes and you get your first big hard frost. So they call it the killing frost. I typically wait about 1 week, and then I go and I'll cut them all down, and then I'll start digging up my tubers, and I use a garden fork, a spade, shovel, dig wide and deep, not to damage your clump. Some people decide they want to leave them in, and like I said, in Sequim, that seems to work pretty well. Like this year, I left in half of mine, and what I did is on a big portion, I take like pots, planting pots, and I just flip them upside down and put a little straw around the edges, and it keeps the moisture off. So that's a really good way to do it. Another section I tried, because one of the farms does this, is I laid some black plastic down over one of the beds, and then I just covered it with about 6 to 8 inches of straw, and it worked fine. There's a flower farm in Port Townsend, and he just got tired of digging them up every year, and he just leaves them. He doesn't touch them until the spring. So, and he has a pretty good success rate, but obviously he has good drainage because otherwise they would just rot. So, but when you're going to store them and you decide you're going to dig them up, so you dig up these great big clumps, and I mean, sometimes you'll get 5 tubers from it. Sometimes you'll get 20, which is kind of cool. You're multiplying your product. And how I like to do it is I'll dig them up and I'll leave all the dirt on. And then when I'm ready to to divide it, I'll give it a good wash, and then within 24 hours I divide it. After I give it that big wash, I wash all the dirt off, because then you can see the eyes. If you leave it too long, like after 24 hours, those eyes sort of go back into the tuber and you can't really see them. and you want one eye on every tuber. So a tuber has, the body, there's the neck, and then the very top part is the crown, or we call it the brain. And there has to be an eye on there, or it's not going to be viable. So, and once again, if you're not sure, rather than going and storing it and then, next spring, go stick it in the ground someplace. If you're not sure it's going to plant, you can always do that pre-sprouting in the spring, and just to see if it's going to actually get a sprout. Storage, you can use vermiculite. So it's a great medium to store. Some people with respiratory issues, I would recommend not doing vermiculite, because it can bother your chest, bother your throat. Wood shavings, and I would miss the wood shavings a couple times, during the winter, because I've had them, like, wood shavings dry out the tubers. I've done this one. You get saran wrap and you wrap each tuber individually, and you don't have to do anything. You can just put them all in a container, and you don't have to worry about it. And most of them did pretty well. I actually like peat moss. I know we're trying to conserve peat moss and not use it, but I do like it. Yeah. And then once again, we talked about labeling. Make sure that you have all these labeled. So otherwise you pull them out in the spring and you're like, oh, okay, what am I doing? Where am I putting this? What is it? So you have the mystery tubers. So, and we talked about overwintering. Oh, there's another lady in Sequim. She cuts down the stalks of the dahlias, and then she lays them on top of the ones that are still in the ground. And she's had great success with that. So I thought that was pretty cool. I have not tried that one yet. But yeah, one year I had like 600 pots. And of course, you got to make sure you stick a rock on top of them, or you're going over to your neighbor's place trying to find all your pots after that big windstorm.
So she's like using the aerial parts of the plant as mulch?
Yep. Which cool. I thought that was just ingenious. So she's been doing it for 20-something years. Since we're talking about this stuff, I would make sure that you dig up your dahlias about every 3 to 4 years. Otherwise, you're going to end up with this just ginormous clump, and it's almost impossible to divide. I mean, you can take a clump and you can cut it in half, or you can quarter it. But to get those individual tubers, if it's been in the ground too long, it's just this unmanageable. It's like irises. If you leave them in the ground too long, you get this huge rhizome, right? And it's just too big to deal with. So
as it gets larger, does the center kind of die out like it does with iris, where you get the older tubers kind of rot?
Yeah, you get the mother tuber in the middle, and it's sometimes mushy or hollow, and it's just hard to work with, and they just keep growing on top of each other. So, yeah, I recommend every 3 years. So just rotating, pull up a third each year.
Yeah. So how do you scale up to that? I mean, from, a couple here and there in a perennial bed or something to 600 varieties.
Yeah. It's something, if you're passionate about it, you're gonna find a way, right? So yeah, I don't do anything halfway. So like I said, I have like over 200 Japanese maples, and that's just in a few years since we've moved here. So yeah, but yeah, if you're going to scale up, you just keep making those beds bigger and finding different beds.
The organization of, when you're overwintering tubers and things like that, what does that look like?
Yeah, I've got like a mud room, and it's, I've got lots of shelving and all these containers full of, and you find out which containers you like. Like, I don't like super deep containers. I've tried that, those big tubs and loading them. I like them that they're about 6 to 8 inches, the container deep, and it's just easier to work with, and they're not laying on top. You don't have all the weight on top of them. So, but yeah, I've got stuff stacked everywhere. And then I actually like to do a lot by color. So I like to plant in drifts, like I said. So it just makes it easier. I flag them with ribbons and which color, so I kind of know where all the yellows are in my area and where all the purples are, and just makes it easier. But yeah, any that you're really attached to, I would not leave in the ground. You pay that $25 or $30 for a tuber. That's the one I would never leave in the ground, because you just never know what could happen. I had a friend, she has a flower farm, and she tried the plastic. She went to lift up the plastic, and the voles had ate almost all of her
Oh no.
tubers. Yeah, so she was pretty heartbroken. Yeah. And you can control the temperature in your shop or wherever you're storing them. And whereas outside, you just never know. You don't know if you got voles. You don't know if it's, a couple of years ago it was down to 6 degrees for 2 days. So that's a little tough. And then you don't know about the rain. We could have a super rainy month and lose a bunch of your stuff. So
yeah. So what are a couple of your favorite varieties?
I guess I like the prolific bloomers. So like Chelsen's Pride, it's a kind of a light, soft pink white. Grows about 5 feet tall, and it's a workhorse. It just keeps pumping out the flowers all summer long. So that's one that I really like. Alamode, it's another one. It's two-toned. It's orange and with little white tips on the end. It's super vibrant. Another one about 4 to 5 feet tall, and it just kind of stands out when you're walking. You just look over, like, oh, it's right there. It's right in my face. It sticks out. Diva, it's a fantastic bloom. It's purple. It's long stems, about 4.5 feet tall. It's one of my favorites. Colorado Classic. It's a pink one. It's got wavy petals, and then it opens fully, about 4 feet tall. And this super nice pink. Got a little bit of yellow in the middle. And then the last one, Cafe au lait. It's sort of a classic. Big fluffy blooms. Gets about 8 inches in diameter, the flower. So it's, we were talking about earlier, it's this great big one. And then it's a prolific bloomer as well, about 4 feet tall. So yeah, there's 5. Give you a nice taste of what I like. So I like a lot of bright stuff, but I like the ones that just keep on blooming.
So what about some of the more reliable performers versus like the fussier varieties, and which is worth it?
Oh, well, we're all different, but I like the ones where you do your deadheading, you do your cutting, and you don't have to play around with them. They just keep on blooming. Yeah, but somebody else might there's the Japanese maple guy, and then there's the bonsai guy. The bonsai guy wants to spend 8 hours on one tree, whereas the Japanese maple guy will have 10 different trees that they're taking care of and making sure that the colors and everything look good. So
what are some of the more common mistakes that growers who are new to dahlias could avoid?
Not pinching. I see that a lot. Then you just end up with like one flower or 1 or 2 flowers per stem. So not as many flowers. And then a lot of people, they don't cut the flowers. It's like, you've got all these flowers, cut them, and don't be afraid. They're going to just keep on growing. Not staking or trying to stake after they're 3 or 4 feet tall. So make sure you do your staking before, right when you're planting or before you're planting. And then we talked about a little bit earlier is not rotating. So leaving your plants in the ground for too many seasons. Make sure you rotate them about every 3 or 4 years. So, of course, underwatering, the plants get dry, then all of a sudden you got all these pests. Not fertilizing, so make sure you feed them. They like to eat.
So do you have any encouragement for gardeners who might be a little intimidated by growing dahlias?
Yeah, just get into it and get started. A good way to do it would be just get some containers, and you can do 1 dahlia per container. Get a a 3 to 5 gallon pot, and same thing, plant them horizontal in the pot and give that a try. And the good thing about pots is you can move them around. You can bring them, and you don't have to dig them up in the winter. You can just bring them in and put them in your shop. I'd also recommend, just doing like a daily walk. It's fun for you. Establish a routine where you're cruising around, looking at your dahlias, inspecting the plants, pulling a few weeds here, a couple weeds here, deadheading a little bit, and then any pests or anything, then you can kind of be on top of it. So just establish like, okay, every day I'm going to just go and walk, just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, and just do a little daily walk through your dahlias or your garden.
Yeah, that sounds like really good advice for just about any gardener, really. Something I've been trying to do. So what would you say is the one thing that makes the biggest difference for being successful with dahlias?
I think selection plays a huge part. So we talked about where to get them. When I first moved here, I went and I bought a bunch of lavender at one of the local stores. First year, I was like, man, this lavender just isn't doing the greatest. It was one of the big box stores. So then went to the lavender festival, and I got to know a couple of the farmers, and I bought these great plants, and they didn't cost much, from the lavender farmer, and got the tips from them and built a relationship with them. And I mean, they flourished and they did great. So same thing with dahlias is, try to connect with the local farmers, the local people, the Dahlia Society. And, rather than getting that, 10 plants for $1 or $5 or whatever. And that good sale item isn't always the good sale item, because they don't necessarily, you don't start with a good product, and they struggle. So, and then you end up might get viruses or whatever else. So, and then just keep on top of it. Start Mother's Day and just keep on top of it all summer and have fun with it. So, experiment and, get lots of different colors and try the different shapes. So,
Well, I can think of several dahlia farms throughout Western Washington. So I would really encourage listeners to seek out a local farmer. There's one literally like 5 miles up the road from me. Dan's Dahlias. He's at the Northwest Flower and Garden Festival every year. Floret Farm up in Skagit County, Mount Vernon. Yeah, they grow a lot of things, but dahlias too.
Well, Swan Island is the biggest dahlia grower in the United States, and that's just down in Oregon, Canby, Oregon. And, if you're into dahlias, if you have a chance, go down and visit their garden or somebody else's garden. Tacoma has one called Hidden Well, and just amazing product, great dahlias, and great videos too, And when you're learning, hop online and go look at the Swan Island videos on how to divide, how to propagate. Same with Hidden Wells. She has all these great videos on, how to do the best storage or try this. So.
Right. Yeah. And you shared some resources with me, which I will put on the blog post so people can see Floret Farm, Swan Island, and some other growers that have really good resources on their websites.
Yep. Dahlia societies too. I mean, it's really fun. Like I said, I joined 2 of them, and it's just fun to learn from their expertise, and everybody does things a little different. And it's like, I tried the saran wrap 1 year. I've done it 2 years, and it was successful. So, good way to store. And I would never have even thought of that. So,
yeah, I'd be worried about too much moisture getting trapped and then rotting or something.
Yeah. I was too, but yeah, it worked out. I made sure there was no air in there, and yeah. I had rot 1 year. I had that year it got really cold. I had some dahlias on my bottom shelf, so the concrete got cold, and some of those rotted because they got frozen. Because if they freeze, then they're done. But yeah, dahlias are wonderful. There's a dahlia for everybody.
Any final thoughts you want to share with listeners about dahlias?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. So, just have fun with it. Deal with your pests right away. Play around, experiment.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is great information about dahlias. I'm excited to try them again.
Hey, thanks again, Aaron.